Well, in this section, we're going to talk about my life since I became a Christian. How did I ever go from never opening a Bible to becoming pastor and chaplain to inmates in jail and prison and juvenile hall? Well, Monica and I, as we grew in Christ, we volunteered to help at a youth program at a church in a town nearby. While there, the pastor's son told me that he could never believe in a God who put the sin of Adam on all mankind. Adam and Eve sinned, and supposedly, according to the way many churches interpret the Bible, all children born to them now inherit a sin nature from them, and we are therefore sinners and estranged from God. And this has become the traditional understanding even today, even though it has been discovered that this understanding was based upon a mistranslation of Romans 5:12. I'm going to read to you from Romans 5:12. Romans 5:12, just as sin entered the world, and the word through one man, and death through sin, in this way death came to all men because all sinned. Now, for hundreds of years, this passage used to read, in whom all sinned, because of a mistranslation, instead of because all sinned. And the traditional understanding has historically been that we inherit our sin nature from Adam. Traditions are hard to change, and this is still the traditional understanding today. We are sinners because we inherit our sin nature from Adam and Eve. I realized I knew very little about all this theology stuff and the Bible, and so I began studying. The young man had a point. I just didn't sound right that a loving God would make me a sinner because of someone else's sin. So Monica and I began doing seminary classes, one class every semester. And eventually, after several years, we completed seminary studies. Actually, Monica took more classes than I did. The answer to the question about inheriting our sin nature from Adam, I answer in this book, Eden to Evil. At Target Truth Ministries, you can check it out. We are, in fact, each personally responsible for our own sin. We each, just like Adam and Eve, have turned away from God and now face death and separation. We were all created before this world was ever founded. Just look in Ephesians chapter 1, verses 4 and 5 and 11. It says, before the earth was formed, God knew us. And just like we are each personally responsible for our own sin in Eden, likewise, each of us are equally responsible for reconciling with God or not. That book, Eden to Evil, addresses the root of our misunderstanding of the Bible, which is our understanding of the two creations account, the Eden and the seven-day account. Again, traditions have caused many churches to misunderstand original sin, and the book Eden to Evil addresses these misunderstandings and these traditions. Now, during this time, the pastor at the church we were helping out, well, he had to move to Southern California, and because we had been in seminary, the church family there asked if I would be willing to become their pastor. Well, we prayed and talked it over, and eventually I accepted. And shortly thereafter, a grandma came to me to tell me that her grandson was in jail, and she asked if I could go visit with him, seeing how I'm a pastor. No problem, I said. But I soon discovered, after 2 weeks of trying to see him, that it was almost impossible for anyone to visit. The jail here at Mendocino County is the oldest jail system in California. I knew of another pastor who was doing once-a-week Bible studies at the jail, and so I joined with him to get access. I discovered that out of over 300 inmates at the jail, we only saw 6 or 8, and only if they wanted to attend the study. The rest of the inmates we never ever saw. So then I volunteered to become a chaplain at the jail because they didn't have one. But due to separation of church and state, both the sheriff as well as the county board of supervisors were reluctant. The jail usually experienced 1 or 2 suicides each year. And about this time, they had 3 suicides in a very short period of time. So all of a sudden, the board of supervisors and the sheriff decided to try to answer the call for a chaplain by drawing up some very exclusive requirements, which they felt would protect them from liability as government officials, and in effect eliminate the ability for anyone to actually meet all of these requirements. These impossible requirements would allow the government to say, well, they tried, but unfortunately couldn't find anyone qualified, and thus they would be shielded from liability and remain politically safe. So here are the requirements. I want you to check to see if you can qualify. There would be no pay for this position, not even health insurance. The county wanted no liability, and therefore the position would be strictly voluntary, no financial connection whatsoever. Well, I wanted to work with the local churches anyway, and not the government, so pay was not an issue. And today I have about 15 to 20 churches and individuals that support me. The second thing they said was the chaplain must be licensed and ordained by a nationally recognized religious organization. Well, I myself never started out wanting to be a pastor. I only agreed to become a pastor and get ordained and licensed to help out my local church. It was quite by accident that I met this requirement. I discovered that God really is involved in our lives more than we know, like it says in Romans 8:28. The third requirement was the chaplain must have at least 1 year experience as a police officer, 1 year's experience as a sheriff's deputy, or have served 1 year in the United States Armed Forces. Well, I guess that time in Vietnam did have a purpose after all. The fourth thing was the chaplain must have at least 1 year experience as a licensed psychologist, 1 year's experience as a licensed sociologist, or a teaching credential and 1 year's experience as a certified teacher in the state of California. Well, it just so happened that 2 years before this, I was thinking about retiring from my microwave radio job. I'd been in the microwave radio field for 37 years. Science and technology were my thing. And I decided to get a teaching credential so I could help out at the local Christian high school, so I'd have something to do in my retirement. For my entire life, ever since high school, I had taken one college class each semester in summer. And after many, many years of night school, I had completed my college degree at San Francisco State University and continued my master's study at University of California, Berkeley, as well as the seminary studies through the Baptist Seminary Extension. Until this teaching job came up, I had never used my college degree for anything. I did retire, I got my teaching credential, and I began teaching school at Deep Valley Christian School. But I discovered that my hearing was so bad after Vietnam that high school students were taking advantage of my poor hearing. So the principal and I decided that I would finish out the year and I would have to find something else to do in retirement. Imagine that. I had 1 year exactly as a certified licensed teacher, as required by the county, to become its first chaplain to the jail and juvenile hall, and I didn't plan any of this. Now, since that day, when there used to be 2 suicides every year, there have only been 2 suicides to inmates in the last 16 years. The tension level for both inmates and deputies has been lowered. Both the inmates and deputies are comfortable calling me if there's a need, even at 3 a.m. in the morning, no less, and I have been called like that. I've come to realize that God is involved in our lives way more than we ever know. Even when I was clueless, God was active. I'm going to read to you from Romans 8, verses 28 to 30. Romans 8, 28 to 30. And we know that God causes all things to work together for good to those who love God. The point of this review is that God and the Bible is that they're needed. The Bible, not me. God's Bible is the authority. Now in the next section, I'm going to take a look at our church traditions and whether they match up with the Bible.